Hello everyone. Hello, folks joining from across the country. Welcome. We are going to get started in just a couple of minutes here once we get folks joined in. Welcome, everybody. Hello, Diana. You're ahead of the curve here. We're just waiting for a few more people to come in, and we're going to have folks do introductions.
DipX is Diana. I like that though. DipX. I want to like a short handle nickname myself. I'm gonna have to come up with one. I don't think Mickey Mac is right. That's what a lot of folks have tried to call me, but it's never really stuck.
That feels like a very New York Mickey Mac. That's
Yeah,
like an MC name.
yeah.
You see, here's the thing. I was gonna ask folks to do this waterfall thing, but folks are so used to
I
joining
love
the
it. Right?
webinar that we're already doing it. So
Hi,
I'll go
Wendy.
ahead I'll go ahead and get started, and we'll try this waterfall. Hi, folks. Welcome to M.A.I.D in the USA 2025, an update on Compassion and Choices and Compassion and Choices Action Network's current legislative campaigns. I'm Patrick Donges, Digital Advocacy Director at Compassion and Choices, the nation's oldest, largest, and most active nonprofit dedicated to improving care, expanding options, and empowering everyone to chart their end of life journey. We are so glad to see everyone in the chat from all over. And if you haven't yet posted your name and where you're from in the chat, go ahead and do it now. And I will post mine there. And in a moment, we are going to, once everyone's posted, we're going to limit the chat. We're going to be using the Q&A function here for question and answer. So before I introduce our moderators, I appreciate your attention to just a few details that are going to help you get the most out of our program today. Our live captioning, including translated captions in Spanish and a variety of other languages, is available by selecting the closed captioning, that's the CC icon in your Zoom. There'll be about 10 minutes for questions and answers towards the end of the program today. You can type your questions at any time in the Q&A in Zoom using the Q&A icon. The panel will answer as many questions as time allows, and we are only going to be taking questions from the Q&A, as I mentioned, so there's no need to raise your hand or ask questions via the chat box once we get through our introductions here. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you via email to you who are on the call and everyone who registered. So without further ado, I'm now happy to welcome our Chief Advocacy Officer, Charmaine Manansala, and Chief Strategy and Marketing Officer, Mickey McIntyre. Take it away.
Thanks, Patrick, very much. Hello, everyone. Hello, Charmaine. How you
Hi
doing?
there. Hi, everybody.
There are so many people joining us. This is so exciting. And usually we get clusters from specific states, but it seems like there's people from Houston and there's somebody from Springfield where you are, and a whole slew of states have joined us today. So thank you all very, very much for joining us. As you know, our strategic plan at Compassion and Choices has the goal, and the Compassion Choices Action Network, the goal of ensuring that by 2028, 50% of all Americans will live where medical aid in dying is authorized and accessible. And we have some victories to celebrate towards that today. We've got lots of territory to cover, and we want to leave lots of time for you, our audience, to ask questions, as Patrick pointed out earlier through the question and answer box. At last check, there were 30 bills to authorize medical aid in dying introduced in states, 18 states, as a matter of fact, across the country, as well as 5 states that have introduced legislation to improve existing laws, including New Jersey, where I'll be in 2 weeks. Can't wait to say hi to all the Jersey folks. Washington State, Oregon, Maine, and in California. And if you're interested in knowing specifically what's happening in your state, there are 2 ways to find that out, or 3 ways actually. You can go to our Compassionate Choices website, and /in-your-state and click on the map for your state, and that'll take you directly to your state. And then we have our legislative update, which is the same compassionatchoices.org/state-advocacy. And that gives you the tote board, and you can also click right into a state there. And then if you have not seen it, we are now publishing a weekly digest, I think now about around here, or a regular digest of what has happened in different states, as well as additional information. It's called M.A.I.D in the USA. It's the national newsletter of our brand new National Medical Aid and Dying Advocacy Center, which is going to be targeted to volunteers who wish to engage in medical aid and dying activity with our campaigns, with other volunteer efforts that are happening within their states or partner organizations, or on their own to move one of our action teams, for example, to try and move medical aid and dying in your state. More about that a little bit later on. But I want to get to Charmaine and some of the amazing activities that have happened and that are happening that we're right in the thick of. And before we get to actually what's happening right around you today, in Illinois, in Springfield, we have a couple of celebrations that we have to have. There's been a lot of movement and breakthroughs in just about every state where legislation was introduced this year, but there are 2 places where one brand new one we got to celebrate, and the other one, which we want to talk about again, so we recognize the importance of what that defeat of a bill actually meant, and what the introduction of a bill actually meant in that state. But let's start with Delaware, Charmaine. The brand spanking new Ron Silverio and Heather Block Delaware End of Life End of Life Options Act, which was signed into law by the brand new Governor Matt Meyer, who we supported at Compassionate Choices Action Network, just last week passed it and signed it on May 20th. It makes Delaware the 12th jurisdiction to authorize end-of-life, this compassionate end-of-life option. His signature follows the Delaware Senate's 11-8 vote to pass, the second time the bill passed the full General Assembly in as many years. Following its passage last year, as you may recall, the bill was vetoed by then Governor John Carney, who you may recall this was a huge disappointment for us. And it was just very sad because we all had hope and expectation that he would sign it, or at least allow it to pass into law. It seems like this victory happened in 2 years, and let's all celebrate. Yes, this is amazing. People have access in Delaware. Let's take that moment. And as you know, folks who have been around with Compassionate Choices, our team has actually immediately sprung into action to start our Access campaign. As you know, we work with our local volunteers and with health systems, the departments of health, as well as the administrations, to be able to try and turn that signature, that new act, into a reality for people on the ground when they need it and when that act can begin implementing. So you'll hear more about our Access campaign in the very near future. But I have to say, Charmaine, in addition to this celebration, this has got to be an acknowledgement of what many people may have seen as like a short term, oh, this took 2 years, but in reality, this took like over a dozen years to manifest, of volunteer organizing and resources. I wonder if you can speak a little bit to what it takes, what that history was, and what it takes, because this is kind of similar to what we see in a lot of states, a long gestation period and then a breakthrough, getting through this burden. So tell us a little bit about that, and in particular, the unique roles of CNC and CCAN in making it work. Can you spend a couple minutes on that?
Yeah, sure thing. And hello, everyone. I'm Charmaine Manansala. Again, I'm the Chief Advocacy Officer for both Compassion and Choices and Compassion and Choices Action Network. So it definitely didn't take 2 years, Mickey. It definitely took 12 years. Delaware, like all states, was a grind. This was years and years of organizing by Compassion and Choices, creating action teams, connecting with advocates, finding storytellers, identifying legislative champions, raising funds, hundreds of events on the ground throughout the years. The popular one in Delaware was the Apple Scrapple. It was literally a constant drumbeat of multiple tactics by our team. Compassion and Choices Action Network allowed us to do more lobbying without limits. So we had countless lobby days, we had TV ads, digital advertising, paid and earned media urging lawmakers to pass the bill. Everything that we did throughout the years, again, that constant drumbeat, resulted in increasing Delawareans and the legislators' support for end-of-life options. So you asked me about the CCAN electoral work. So this is my CCAT hat on, talking about partisan politics. Once our Compassion and Choices Action Network entity was formed, in the state, we were able to give donations to electoral campaigns of supportive legislatures. So, legislators, I mean, Governor Meyer was one of them. So, when he was running for office, we were able to attend one of his fundraisers. And during that time, he told us, he did it on Facebook, but he also personally told us that he would sign the bill should it cross his desk. And we also, there was a special elections in Delaware that were really key for us because when we started the session, we did not have enough votes to get it out of both the House and the Senate. In particular, in one body, I believe it's the House, there were two special elections, and had those two electeds at the time not made it into office, we would not have had the bill pass. Because of the Compassion and Choices Action Network, we were able to help their campaigns by giving a substantial amount for their campaigns. But, Mickey, what I have to say really is at the heart of any success we have in states, including Delaware, are the advocates and volunteers who continually show up year in and year out to ask lawmakers for this compassionate option. This really is about perseverance. As you recall, last year, the bill already passed out of the legislature, but was vetoed by the former governor, John Carney. And just a few months later, we had to get up again and figure out how we can break through the legislature and to make sure that we get the votes necessary. So, you know, unfortunately, there were advocates who weren't able to of avail medical aid in dying themselves because it had been vetoed or years have already passed. But the win in Delaware is so meaningful to me because it really cements their legacy, all of their time that they fought for the bill during their last days.
Yeah. It's so tragic sometimes. I mean, we every month we do an all staff Zoom call, and we often hear stories of people who are accessing medical aid and dying, or working on other end of life issues as advocates, as volunteers. And it's so sad how often it is an advocate who has dedicated their life. The Other Side, Linda Bluestein documentary is coming out this year, And she is one of those advocates who's absolutely amazing, who has died in as part in while it was dying as she was engaged in her advocacy. Those stories are particularly compelling. I think, you know, that normalization kind of brings us that kind of that having to wait for medical aid and dying kind of brings us to another place where there was an amazing success this year, but where there was a precarious balance where people might not ever be able to get it again, just as we were seeing some real progress being made. And I'm talking about Montana. You've heard us talk about it before. And it's a really amazing story. As you know, it wasn't a legislative authorization. It was a case brought on behalf of Bob Baxter by Compassion and Choices, which makes medical aid and dying possible in Montana. And there's been a ton of work that Compassion and Choices has been there, defending it against prohibitions, etc. Charmaine, what happened this year? Just give us again, like, because it's so important. What made the difference this year in being able to defeat the bill? The bill that would have criminalized medical aid and dying in Montana. What really made the difference this year when we really thought we were going to lose in many ways? And
Yeah,
instead, we had a big victory.
Yeah, we absolutely thought we were going to lose the state. It was the closest ever that the so-called Imprisonment Act would have passed. Once again, Montana advocates in our team succeeded in protecting medical aid and dying in Montana for two main reasons, Mickey. One is that CNC and the many clinicians and health systems in Montana have made great strides to normalize the practice in Montana. It has begun to be ingrained into the health system environment there, meaning that it has touched more legislators in personal ways. Montana is the best example of how we would like it to be, frankly, across the country. Also, I think one of the things that made a huge difference this year is that in this Montana session, Republican Representative Julie Darling introduced a bill, the first bill to proactively codify medical aid and dying into Montana law since 2011. While that bill did not move forward, testimony on it was instrumental in changing hearts and minds. At least one Republican representative who had previously opposed the bill was transformed by the testimony by our supporters that when the bad bill came across, he actually gave a floor speech against the criminalization bill.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show how death is universal, and good health care should be universal as well in terms of it shouldn't be a political divide that determines what it is. And I'm wondering what you take away from this bipartisan defeat, plus this show on the part of the Republican senator in moving this bill forward. What does this tell you about the momentum of in the national end of life rights movement? Like, I mean, there's got to be bigger meaning here, right?
Yeah, this unprecedented display of bipartisan support reinforces again what you said that medical aid and dying should be bipartisan because this is a values-driven issue. This is especially notable given Montana's political landscape. In 2020, nearly half of Montana voters identified as conservative, and in 2024, the state voted to re-elect President Trump by a 20-point margin. So we see Montana as a strategic model moving forward, proof that with consistent engagement, clear messaging, and strong coalition building, medical aid and dying can continue to hold ground and even expand with growing support from Republicans and libertarians in potentially politically challenging regions.
Wow. So, I mean, also when we see how close, like, for example, the West Virginia ballot was, with
Yes.
even very limited resources being spent there because of the way that ballot was presented, and the closeness of that, even as badly as it was presented and written and things like that, and the way it came to be, it just shows that bipartisan support, the cross demographic support in all categories for medical aid and dying exists, and we really need to move forward with capturing that as much as we can. Now let's move on to some states. We're not going to be able to cover every state, but some states where there is some action really happening. Even as we speak, you are in Springfield, Illinois. We drew you out of a hearing and hopefully some more action. I don't even have a question here. Just tell me what's happening and what's going on with our volunteers and legislators in the state.
Yeah, you actually drew me from a floor vote, the House floor vote. So as soon as this webinar is done, I'm running back to the Capitol. But we are in the final stretch in the Illinois legislature's regular session. In fact, session ends on Saturday. Lawmakers only have until Saturday to authorize medical aid and dying here. Yesterday, we had a hearing in the House Executive Committee or the committee room. I was so proud, Mickey. It was a sea of yellow. It was amazing. For me, the best part of the job is being in the trenches with our storytellers and advocates. Some even drove over 6 hours round trip just to be present. But here's where we're at. Just a recap for everybody. In January, the assistant majority leader in the House and uh, a Senate leader introduced the End of Life Options Act, both in the House and the Senate. Just so you know, a side note, we refer to the bill in Illinois as Deb's Law for Deb Robertson, a resident of Chicago. Who has really spoken out about this bill. So yesterday, the Senate committee advanced, sorry, in April, the Senate Executive Committee advanced the bill. However, it stalled in the Senate despite our ongoing activities and lobbying with all of our advocates and storytellers trying to move the bill forward. However, yesterday, the House Executive Committee advanced the bill and it's now being debated on the floor this afternoon. When I left the building, the proceedings were on recess, so I don't know if they've gotten to our bill yet. So it's currently being debated. Fingers crossed that it passes out of the House. It will then move to the Senate side. What we're hoping for is a quick turnaround within the committee or a concurrence vote within the House floor to get to a final vote on the Senate side. Again, quick turnaround. It's already Thursday, so we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah. Wow, it's so, this is another example, right? So like we've been organizing in Illinois since, I mean, before the national conference that we held there over 10 years ago,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So maybe 15 years ago, we've been organizing in Illinois. But again, the bill, the specific strategy in Illinois was to not to introduce the bill until we felt like we would actually be able to make progress on that bill. And so that's why this is going to turn out, when it passes, I'm not going to say if, but when it passes, it may seem like it was a short period of time, but actually, it was almost now 2 decades of work in
That's right.
Illinois. Hey, Charmaine, what would it mean? I know we've been looking at Minnesota, we've been looking at Illinois for a while now. What would it mean? Delaware just passed. Hopefully, we'll have some good news about some other northeastern states in the near future. But what would it mean for the Midwest to pass this?
Again, we have the coast, right? There's authorization on the West Coast, there's authorization on the East Coast, but we don't have any authorization in the middle. So authorization in Illinois is a really big deal because it'll show that our movement continues to expand and the American public continues to open their arms and their hearts to this law because, you know, it is a fundamental, you know, law that everyone should have. I'm hoping that a passage in Illinois, right, gives its neighboring states some push to get their act together and to also pass this law.
Yeah. It'll be amazing. And I do want to give a nod to the Rocky Mountain states, some of which Washington and Oregon
That's
border.
where I'm from. I'm from Colorado.
In Colorado, there's New Mexico, there's also Montana, which, by the way, given the way it was authorized, doesn't really have that residency requirement as well. So let's nod to that section. Now we want the Midwest, then we need the South. Maybe some changes in Virginia might happen. I see Corinne Carey just joined us, and she has been ridiculously busy with the New York team, making some major advances in New York. So, Charmaine, we're going to change this up, and we're going to go straight to Corinne, and I'll come back to talking about California for our Californians in the crew. Corinne, what's going on? Give us the update, the quick update. I know you're packed and you're slammed out there. What's going on?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to join, Mickey. I'm really excited to be here with you today. Many of the folks on this call probably know that the New York's Medical Aid in Dying Act passed in the Assembly at the end of April, and we have been hard at work pressing the Senate to take a vote. And according to recent reports in the press, it looks like the votes are there, and we are waiting for lawmakers to schedule that vote. They do gavel out for the year on June 12th, so time is ticking and running out, and we're doing everything that we can to ensure that a vote happens on this bill before they leave.
Wow, thank you. Say, hey, listen, I've been to the New York State Assembly, I've been to Albany, I've been to the dinners, I've been to all of that. I never actually think of the New York Assembly moving, or the New York, legislature moving very quickly. But like that, the speed with which it went through the Assembly committees and the floor vote was really impressive and amazing. And your team keeping up with all of that and the coalition partners as well. Is that the kind of thing? Is that the kind of the way the legislature works in New York? When it's ready, it really moves, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, for bills of this import, yes. The leadership keeps very tight control over how things happen. And so you don't see bills like this meander their way through the committee process and sit out there for a long time. What I'm being told in the Capitol is that this bill is, you know, on the same plane as like marriage equality. It
Oh,
was a gigantic effort. It was one of the most difficult votes that people have taken. It was far more emotional even than many of those other issues that have passed in the over the past few decades. So it was treated differently than other bills might have been.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just so what you're saying is there's still the possibility, even though there's a short window, this legislature can act really fast in the Senate side, and hopefully maybe we'll see this happen this year. Hopefully with continued pressure from your team, with the leadership of our sponsors and our legislators who are supporting us, and all of the hard work of the volunteers and the advocates on the ground and our coalition partners there. While I have you here, can you tell me, we all know that New Jersey already authorized medical aid in dying, but there's an effort to improve that bill by volunteers in the state with support of Compassionate Choices and the Action Network. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on there? Do you have a status update on that?
Yeah, so there is a bill pending in the legislature that would waive the waiting period in some cases. And it appears that that bill will not be heard until the fall. There's always different considerations that lawmakers have. And even though there's a lot of support for that bill, lawmakers, I think, want to wait until after the November election before they bring it forward for a vote. So that's the timeline that we're looking at in New Jersey.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update, and thank you for all your hard work. Congratulate the team on the progress so far and the volunteers. We're so proud of you all, and get back at it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, take care. The last time Corinne joined us, I feel like two things. She was in a cloakroom. I'm wondering where she is today. She was in the cloakroom, I think, of the assembly when she gave us the last update. I'm also reminded that you're in the House. She's waiting for some stuff to happen in Illinois. And last time when we were on this call, the Montana vote happened. So we should have these calls more frequently because stuff happens when we have these calls. It's amazing. Charmaine, did you have anything you wanted to add about New York? And what's going on there.
Sorry about that. I was on mute. So similar to Delaware, it is persistence, persistence, persistence. Um, Corinne is one of the state directors in my team who really leaves no stone unturned, right? She gets into it to the nitty gritty with each of the legislators. She works hand in hand with our storytellers and our advocates. She works and collaborates with her team and, partner organizations just to find a way to get it through. And we're now closer than ever to getting it passed in New York.
Wow. And I think that, one of the things that we did this year at Compassion Choice and Compassion Network Action Network is seeing the opportunities that we were reading in the tea leaves, and our strategy analysis and our ongoing evaluation, and with the great leadership that Corinne provides, that whole campaign and that whole coalition in New York was actually taking a bunch more resources and positioning them in New York because we saw this opportunity. There are now over 15 staff, right, or so that are working on New York, both locally and nationally.
Yeah, so what we did this year that's different than in previous years, we added more staff to the states that are closest to passage because we know that once a state wins, it really lifts not only that state, but all of the other states who are still trying to authorize medical aid and dying. So we consolidated staff, focus our resource on the ones, again, that are closest to passage.
And I'll just add, for New Jersey, it's just so remarkable. The volunteers that we have that continue to persist even after authorization in improving the situation on the ground, and enhancing and making the laws better. And I think New Jersey is one of those states. We've seen it in Colorado and New Mexico and other states, where the laws continue to get better. The authorization continues to get better with the access campaigns. And the amazing doctors and clinicians, the practice gets better and better on the ground. Now let's go to another state where
Sure.
that's happening, California. Can you tell us about that?
So, Mickey, as you remember, I was part of the team that authorized in California. Unfortunately, California has a sunset date. This is the only state in the nation with a medical aid and dying law that consists of an end date for the law. There's no, again, no other jurisdiction, right, has this. So what we're doing this year is trying to remove the sunset to provide peace of mind to terminally ill Californians that this compassionate option will not never be taken away from them. So this year we work with Senator Blake Spear to introduce the bill to make the law permanent. It's already passed out of 3 committees: Senate Health, Senate Judiciary, and Senate Appropriations Committee. And the bill is now making its way to the Senate floor. I believe the action will be sometime next week. And, between the passage from Senate Appropriations, um, ongoing through this week and until the bill gets called on the floor, we will continue to mobilize our volunteers to meet with their senators and help secure the votes needed for floor passage. So California works in 2-year legislative sessions. I'm actually not sure if we will be moving forward with the bill through the assembly because there was such a huge turnover in the California legislature. 70% of them are new. So most of them have not had conversations about medical aid in dying. So it's a lot of education again from our team and our advocates to make sure we secure the votes necessary.
Right, it takes such time. You know, the bills themselves are very intricate.
Yeah,
People's knowledge of this is not usually that great when we start talking to them, you know, like because you know it's not a topic that people want to talk about or talk about very frequently. So that educational curve is really pretty high. And unlike a lot of other healthcare or medical practice regulation that happens at the state level, ours is pretty specific. It's got like is more intricate than what a lot of other pieces of legislation look like. So I can imagine that educational effort is a pretty big hill to challenge. And that's also why we are starting this so early, as opposed to waiting till the session right before the sunset to try and make this happen. Because we always try to read those strategy tea leaves and try to figure out exactly what is the right time. Look at the data, look at the research that we do at CNC, look at the head counts of legislators and where they are in their
right.
knowledge curve to really be able to determine, you know, working with the right sponsors, all of those pieces that make for readiness to be able to do something like this. So thank you for that.
Oh, if I can put in a plug for California.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, so we have a Senate sponsor, Senator Blake Spear. We're still looking for an assembly sponsor, assembly lead. So if there are Californians out there who have good relationships with their assembly members, please, please contact me because we need your help in identifying an assembly sponsor.
Great. Yes, please. Um, that would be really helpful if you have that. And I also, you know, the continued effort in California includes our continued defense against the United Spinal Court case, which
Right.
is still out there on an ongoing basis. So we're trying to protect the law against that case. And then, you know, in a state as big as California, you know, one of the biggest issues that we have in California is access. And so if you are not already helping us or trying to work on either individually yourself or as part of a group effort, trying to ensure that your doctor is knowledgeable and willing and is able to work with medical aid in dying in the health system that they're in, and or helping to change that health system's policy, we could really use your support in increasing that access on the ground because the laws sometimes are just the first step. It's really the access that is the more difficult piece. And I'm wondering, we want to talk about Massachusetts. I was hoping Melissa might join us. Did she join us? Is Melissa Stacy here yet? There's Melissa. Hello, Melissa. I was hoping you'd stop by.
Hi, Mickey. Hi, Charmaine. Nice to see you all.
What's happening in Massachusetts?
Oh, we're just trying to pass legislation and get this over the finish line. So it's been a busy day today. We just got back out of the state house. Actually, we did a hand drop and dropped hand invitations to all 200 legislators across the state house and their offices to invite them to our lobby day next week. So we have a multiple lobby days throughout the year, but this is our really big one. And so we're anticipating about 100 advocates to come in and listen to our legislative champions speak and hear from some incredible caregiver advocates whose family members are struggling and want this option. And so we're really excited for a packed day next week and an impactful day next week.
Wow, that's terrific. Those yellow shirts will be there at the legislature. Is that what's going to happen? And those walking the halls?
yellow shirts and teal. Some of our advocates like teal too, but yellow shirts, definitely yellow ties. We love it when our legislators also wear the colors. So that's fun to see. We always like to see who is matching us. And we're awesome, happily to be joined by some of our coalition partners and their members that will be joining as well. But we're doing the lead work and the effort in the state and really leading the lobby day. So excited to see the yellow shirts and the work that's being done.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for all the work you're doing there. Please thank the volunteers. I feel like we've been working there for a very, very long time, and I know a bunch of those volunteers from the last time that I was working in Massachusetts. And say hi to everybody and thank them all for us, the volunteers, those legislators who have been with us forever. Please thank them all, and thanks for stopping by today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, I will. And thank you so much. Yeah, we couldn't do it without our incredible team of advocates. We're so grateful for them and the stories that they share, and they're consistently coming back and telling the stories and moving to get this passed and building the momentum we need. So appreciate the opportunity to see everybody, and I'll pass on your thanks.
Thank you so much. And let's go pass out some more yellow shirts, get some more people engaged and involved there in Massachusetts. That's what we need.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Melissa. Take care. Hey, Charmaine, it feels like Massachusetts, this is a forever state, it feels like in some ways. Do you have thoughts about that history? I mean, it feels like we make progress every session, but at the same time, there's a long history. Tell me a little bit about the history, like
So Melissa I see Melissa still on. Melissa, you're on mute.
I am. I heard Massachusetts and I figured I'd hang out and listen for a few minutes.
Yeah, what Nikki asked is like, what is the reason for the
the history. So I was actually talking about like some of the history. So I remember for some of the folks, and you may be able to add into this, you'll probably heard some of these stories from our volunteers of back before the ballot initiative in 2018. I think of Paul Spears, who is a disability rights advocate, who was on our board of directors in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, and the amazing organizing he did in Cambridge and all of this work. It's been quite some time that we've been working on this. Are there thoughts about the history that you have, that you've heard?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And Charmaine also has some of that historical knowledge. So Charmaine, please feel free to chime in. From a historical perspective, the bill was originally filed in 2008. So you're absolutely right. It's been 17 years that we've been working on it in Mass. And we're very fortunate that the chief of staff at the time that the original bill was filed is now one of our lead bill sponsors in the House, Representative Phillips, and he literally wrote the bill. So it's awesome to have his long-term support, and he's very passionate about getting this done. The ballot initiative, I think, was a really tough one in 2012. It failed by 51 to 49. And we were outspent in the last 2 weeks of the campaign 5-1. And so to only fail by such a small margin with such a large outspending expenditure is really impressive. But there was a lot of hesitation in the legislature to overturn that, and it takes some time. And so what we've been seeing, I'd say since about 2018, 2019, is the momentum building again within the legislature, and more, particularly as newer legislators come in and learn more about the issue, specifically those sits down as people have personal experiences. We're seeing that shift happen, and the momentum that has been gained over the past 5 or 6 years is phenomenal. And so moving, the bill forward first out of public health to healthcare financing, and then last year it moved from there to the Senate Ways and Means for the first time ever. This year, we've already started off the year with a hearing. Normally, the hearings don't take place till October. We had ours April 2nd. It was the first one in public health, part of the first hearing in public health this year. And so we're really seeing that momentum shift, and really hopeful and looking forward to. And Tuesday is going to help us continue that momentum forward and really pushing to make this the year that we make the progress we need to get this bill over the finish line. And we're pushing hard with our bill champions and our incredible sponsors and advocates.
Great. I'm so happy to hear it. And again, thank everybody there. 2012, I'm sorry, I misquoted. I think I said 2018. I'm trying to forget that year. That was one of the years that I worked there, and it was so hard, when we were working on that campaign, to lose it by such a small margin, and to be so grossly outspent. But thank you, Melissa. We're going to press on because we want to leave some time for questions. And so I'm just going to check in. We covered a lot of territory here. These are most of the states that are still kind of in play. Charmaine, is there anything else you want to add that you want people to know, or before we go to the Q&A?
Yeah, so as I described earlier, every single state is really a long haul effort for us, right? If, we have plan A, B, C, and D for every single situation. And even with all the planning and strategizing that we do, we sometimes, can't get it through legislatures. And what I just want to be very honest, Mickey. One of the biggest reasons for this is resources. If I had an unlimited amount of resources in my arsenal, you better believe that more of these states will be passed, right? Because we could go to ballot in states like I saw a bunch of questions regarding Maryland. Maryland, right? Legislators are, using medical aid and dying, the aid and dying bill as, a piece of legislation that they can horse trade for votes. You know, 2 years ago, it didn't move because our bill was traded by certain I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I don't care about them, frankly. But certain key legislators in Maryland traded their vote to get their preferred bill passed, which is really unfortunate, right? So it was one vote, it was one vote away to really going through. Again, it's resources. If we had the resources to do more phone calls, to do TV ads, to do, everything that the opponents are doing, then we would be more successful and doing it quicker, you know, um, if we had the money. Right now, though, I'm just truly, truly proud of the progress we've done given the financial resources that we have.
It's a testament to there are a lot of other movements that I would talk about, on both sides of the political spectrum, or bipartisan movements like ours that we're kind of it's been 2 years since our last authorization, which is a minuscule amount of time for a lot of movements.
Yeah.
So we've been extremely successful in the last periods of time, in doing this, but it's getting harder and harder, not easier and easier, and more expensive and more expensive, and protect with also with the access, and with some of these places where we may need to in the future use some other tools at our disposal, like ballot initiatives and things like that, which, as we saw in Massachusetts and in West Virginia, should not be moved into lightly, and should not be moved into without clear understanding of what the resources are that it takes to win.
And that's why we lost in Massachusetts. Yep.
Yeah, and in West Virginia for that matter, because of
Yeah.
like the resources on the ground, and also this idea that it may seem like we spend a lot of money on medical aid and dying, but we're talking about 35 states with legislation protecting the states that already exist, advancing with with access. So we end up having to shift resources to states to get these breakthroughs, like you mentioned earlier. So if you haven't already made your contribution this year to either CNC or CCAN, please do so, or make one to each. That's fine as well. If not, please, if you have, please reach out to your friends, neighbors, and colleagues to get them involved in Compassionate Choices and make that contribution. Hey, Patrick, what's your number one question other than the one that the two that Charmaine just answered?
Yes, we have a lot of questions specific to states, Virginia, Michigan, um, and New Hampshire, Pennsylvania.
Just
So
ask away, Patrick.
Let me order them for you. Okay, so let's talk about Virginia because we need a southern state. Talk about Virginia for a second, Charmaine.
Yeah, so Virginia, right? We had a great author in Virginia. It passed through committees and passed through a body. However, we knew that the governor would veto it. Virginia is actually the only state with a big race this November. So the governor is up for re-election. We're hoping to get a governor who would be supportive of medical aid and dying, and then we will continue to plug away once we get somebody who is supported.
Okay. So I do want to say that also, just a reminder of those two URLs that I gave you earlier, so you can find out what's happening in your state at those URLs. We update that information with public-facing information every week. So that gets consistently updated, so you can always find out what's going on in your state in those states. Before we get there, though, Charmaine, I'm wondering, do you have an update on, let's talk about New Hampshire and then Michigan, okay?
Yeah, so New Hampshire, I actually testified there 2 years ago. The problem with New Hampshire is the makeup, right? It's Republican controlled in the Assembly, the Senate, as well as the governorship. And while it passed in the Assembly, there was no path to passage in the Senate, and the governor would have vetoed it.
There you go. Thank you. And Patrick, could you add in the URL for the Compassionate Choices Action Network too, since people are a little less familiar with that one, where they can
yes.
also learn more about Power Compassion and how they can support electoral activities. In the meantime, Charmaine, Michigan?
Yeah, Michigan's great. We have a lot of volunteers who are really amped up in trying to move Michigan forward. Again, we're looking at the dynamics of the political makeup in Michigan. We're not quite there yet to having a majority in the House and the Senate. While we have a Democratic governor who may likely be supportive, we don't know, we don't have enough support yet amongst the legislators.
Right. And I
And
think
it doesn't necessarily mean that because they're a Democratic if that they're Democratic that they support the bill. Because remember in Delaware, right? It was a Democratic governor who vetoed the bill. So it doesn't mean that just because you're a Democrat, you're supportive of it, but the likelihood for somebody supporting a bill, um, you know, it doesn't mirror the party lines of the legislators. It's just based on what we've seen in other states.
right. Um,
We do have a couple of questions about the type of objections that we're hearing from elected officials during hearings, and it has been interesting this year listening into a lot of these hearings. Um, Charmaine, are you hearing new things, or is it a lot of the same?
So I've now been doing this work for 10 years, and it's literally regurgitated material over and over. Doctors are not supposed to be causing harm to patients. People with disabilities are going to be threatened and coerced with this law. Um, um, the religious, especially amongst the Catholics, it's the same. I think what I've seen though is that the messaging that the opponents have done have become more refined, and the targeting that they've done, um, you know, it's a lot sharper, and they're expending a lot more resources to get their messages to legislators. Right when we saw the bill moving in Delaware, the opponents put together a video text campaign that was blasted to every single Delawarean legislator speaking out against the bill. Like that costs money. In Connecticut, when we saw it moving, the Catholic Conference bought an ad during the Final Four of, the NCAA tournament. UConn is it's a state team. Everybody in Connecticut supports University of Connecticut basketball. So during the NCAA tournament, they bought an ad against the Connecticut bill. They're spending money.
It just keeps happening. It's so scary. The where the money is coming from and how big it is. Go ahead. Did you have I feel like I missed the state back before, Patrick, but do you have another question?
There's also a question about the disability rights community and what we have seen as opposition among some organizations. But I do want to note that in poll after poll, we do see folks who self-identify as living with a disability supportive of our issue. And the question is, what progress are we making with making inroads with some of those oppositional organizations?
Yeah, so the last, maybe it's 2 or 3, maybe 3 years now, there's now a nationwide disability organization called Us for Autonomy, who is a disability organization specifically endorsing medical aid in dying and has worked with us at hearings to testify that the disability community is not monolithic. Again, like Patrick said, poll after poll, right? Across all demographics, Republicans, Democrats, Catholic, non-Catholic, people with disabilities, people without a disability, all support medical aid in dying. And for full disclosure, you can't see me because I'm sitting right now, but I am Catholic and I'm also a person with disability, having lived with multiple sclerosis for 25 years. So we're not monolithic.
It's also interesting because we share, and medical aid and dying actually shares a great deal with the disability rights community, which is that our work in medical aid and dying is really about patient-directed, fully
Right?
informed patient-directed care and changing medical practice to a model where fully informed patient-directed care is the norm, where what the individual wants to get and have within their care, particularly their end of life care, they are able to access, whether that's a little bit of care, or whether that's everything that they want to have, or a natural death. That's what medical aid and dying is all about, is about transferring the power of an end of life option from the medical establishment to the individual to be able to make that decision, to give ultimate autonomy to the individual, not unlike what the disability rights community is advocating for, right, Charmaine? Or am I off base on that?
No, you're totally right. Hey, Mickey, I only have 3 more minutes. Can I go through a couple of these questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Is
And we'll
is
follow up with everybody whose question does not get answered. So
Yeah, it says, does CNC have a list of helpful physicians nationwide? We don't, but we do have an end of life care line. Patrick, do me a favor. If folks need help in accessing medical aid and dying, or have any questions regarding any type of end of life care options, Patrick, please put the phone number on the chat. So a couple of you said you have contacts with California Assembly members. Patrick, please put my email on the chat. John Eldon, please contact me because I would love your help finding an assembly sponsor. That would be great, especially if your assembly member is in a committee of jurisdiction. It says here, when New York says they have the votes, how secure is that? So, my team works with a whole bunch of people. We hear from volunteers what their legislators are saying. our team goes to the legislature themselves and find out what the legislators are saying. We have teams of lobbyists. Usually a state has a lobbyist, but in bigger states, sometimes we have to pay for 2 lobbyists. In California, to get that passed, we had to have 3 lobbyists, counting the votes to make sure we know where they're at. But as I told my team in the house today when we were in the gallery, I said, because they were saying, oh, we have, maybe we have that person or maybe we might not have that person. I said, folks, none of these are sure until they actually vote in our favor. Until they actually vote, we need to keep pushing and pressing to make sure we continue to have their support. Jerome, you put, I'm an 87-year-old and in a wheelchair. Can I join activities in Zoom? Absolutely. Jerome, can you do me actually, Jerome.
Info at.
Okay, great.
Jerome, just send an email to info at, and we'll keep an eye out for it. Info at compassionandchoices.org, and we'll keep an eye out for that, and we'll get you connected to the right people.
It says any chance in Pennsylvania, not right now. But we are organizing in Pennsylvania. We're trying to build capacity in the state. So Pennsylvania is one of the states that we are looking at. Mickey, I really have to run.
Okay, you've got to go. So I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Charmaine, very much. We really appreciate it. Get back to the assembly. We go fight, win there. Yeah.
But let me just say thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your support. We would not be able to do this work without you. We appreciate you. My team on the ground thanks you. So, but reach out to us. If you can help, if you can support, if you have questions, please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Charmaine. And one last thing for everybody else. Go ahead, Charmaine, and head out. I know you have to go, but
Okay.
the last thing is that you can also volunteer. There is a volunteer sign up and on our website. So feel free if you want a yellow T-shirt and you want to volunteer. That is the way to go about doing that, and that will go through the process, and you will be linked up with the activities that are happening in your state. So you can go to take action on the on the Compassionate Choices website, and Patrick just put the URL in there as well. And that 800 number for the end of life consultation is our new Call Compassion line. Also available at that line is our new End of Life Justice Legal Center, which if you are having difficulty accessing end-of-life care, or having challenges accessing medical aid and dying, call that number, and you may end up in the end-of-life consultation. They may also encourage you to speak to one of our legal advocates in the End-of-Life Justice Center as well, who can provide some real-time support in what legally might be happening in order to help you with your care, not just medical aid and dying. Okay, thank you all very, very much. Patrick, as always, thank you very, very much for your organizing. And we will see you soon on our next either legislative update, federal update, legal update, who knows, all our updates. Check out the events page at compassionandchoices.org. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate everyone coming, and you will get an email with this recording shortly, likely by at close of business tomorrow. Thanks again. Have a great week.